Okay, so it comes from a bit of a reflection on what's happened when I remember, I think in 2018 I was organizing a behavioral OR stream in Informs, and we were somehow lucky to have next to us in parallel a behavioral operations management stream. So it was good to see what they were doing, and at that point, they sort of thinking, oh wow, they may be our colleagues or our competitors. So from that sort of experience, always came to my mind, saying, okay, I may need to write something about that. Definitely, I didn't have a lot of time to write a very in-depth discussion on this, which I think it could be an outcome of this presentation if there's people motivated and that wants to work with me on this. But basically, this presentation is based on a chapter of the second book of the Behavioral OR, that it was competencies, and trying to, that's why you have the title of competencies and capabilities in terms of behavioral OR and behavioral operational research. But I think it's a topic that it's nice to discuss and to have a clear idea of where we are in this area. So basically, I will try to go faster on the basic definition of behavioral operations management, behavioral operational research, and then go into more the practices, the similarities and differences. A very simple two examples of that, and what I think are the opportunities for collaboration between the fields. But this is a sort of more idealistic rather than sort of sustained on a systematic literature review where you can have perhaps more granular insights. So both behavioral operations management and behavioral OR, they have different definitions. There's no sort of unified definition on the field, but clearly behavioral operations, I think it's the interesting thing from behavioral operation is that they study the attributes of human behavior, but mostly on the design, management, and improving of an operating system. So clearly, they are mostly focused on a specific context, which is operation, and how they can improve the operations of a company, of a service, and what are the implications of the behavioral aspects of that improvement. Crosson, they have another a strong definition where they say behavioral operations is the study of potentially non-hyper-rational actors in operational context. So if you take from the operations management, not the qualitative operations management, the ones that they use case study, but more the quantitative part of operations management, they have models where they try to optimize inventory, they try to optimize routines. So they have these hyper-rational actors that they know how to maximize, how to minimize the cost of running your inventories with all the variables that they have available, as well as understanding all the potential roads that you can take, which in reality, people are not like that, right? When you may give to a certain truck driver a route plan in the morning to reduce their distribution, but then if there are an accident, if the driver doesn't feel well, definitely the whole planning will go out, and then you have delays and all the different aspects. So clearly, behavioral operations management are focusing on a specific context, which are operations, and looking at the behavioral aspects of that. Therefore, as I said, is clearly share the same goal, both definition, the design, management, and improvement of operating system and processes. But clearly, there's the big difference between operations management and behavioral operations management is that in behavioral operations management, the actors are not, the objective of the actor are not expressed in monetary terms, so they are not necessarily they are trying to reduce costs or maximize profits. They don't act in a consciously and deliberate manner. They don't know all the roads that they can take, right? And they are not having a specific optimal function that they have to achieve. So clearly, from the perspective of behavioral operations management, is trying to portray normal people working in operational context and with all the limitations that they have, rather than the idealistic system that can be done through some optimization models. So clearly, behavioral operations management start with micro level, trying to improve the design and processes. Definitely the way that they do that analysis is through trying to analyze the deviation of this normative behavior. And that's why they take to do a lot of laboratory tests and some real world data collection in that sense. On the other hand, behavioral operational research, definitely we know very well. This is a group of people that they have this definition. So there is this definition of behavioral OR is psychology, sociology, cognitive, and emotional factors that contribute to model, solve problems, and support decision making. Also, I think here it become the main difference between behavioral OR and behavioral operations management. For behavioral OR, at the core is the concept of models. We are thinking about models and how the models impact on behavior or how we represent behavior in the model. So our perspective is broader in the sense that we are not trying to design system, although there are some practice that focus on that, but mostly trying to support a decision-making and solving problems. So clearly, the models are also not only the mathematical solution, but also these transformative objects that connect the practice of OR to the concept of problem solving. So clearly, they use similar theories. Behavioral operations management and behavioral OR, they are based on behavioral sciences, psychology, and economics, but definitely behavioral OR uses that for uncovering how behavioral factors affect the development and use of OR models. And that comes to a very important difference. OR models, because they are in terms of analyzing and solving problems, we may have some OR models that are pure qualitative, so soft OR type of models, and also we have quantitative models. And in that case, we will be closer to behavioral operations management in that sense. So also, we have a different sort of perspective in that sense, because we look at the actors. What are the sort of the factors that affect this behavior, this practice of OR from a behavioral perspective? The type of actors that we have, the impact of the OR methods, the resulting behavior in OR actors. We can say that in behavioral operations management is more defined. The problem is better defined, is contextualized on some specific process or operations, while in behavioral OR we are much broader, right, in our focus on the study. And also we have as well this other categorization of behavior in models, how we put human behavior in models. We can have a hyper-rational behavior, or we can have a completely bounded rational behavior in our models that will affect everything, right? The outcomes, the insights, the solutions to problem. Behavior with models, how we use the models to do a sort of support decision-making and solving problems. And then behavior beyond models, how the models impact much further than just simply the decision-making process and the culture and the the organization in itself. So clearly, I would say our field is much broader than behavioral operations management in that sense. So you more or less start getting what can be the sort of the similarities and differences in behavioral between the two fields. So clearly, behavioral OR is concerned with all the areas of the organization, mostly focused on problem solving or supporting decision making. Behavioral operations management is mostly focused on how to make the operations more effective and efficient. And when there are deviation of that operations is somehow the betray of an objective function that you either try to maximize if there are revenues or you try to minimize if those are costs. So it's much more defined this sort of the area in terms of behavioral operations management. The other thing is that behavioral OR both focus on soft and qualitative and quantitative models, and behavioral operations management only on quantitative models, and that is an important difference to consider. Given the focus on practice, behavioral OR, I would say, is more eclectic, right, on the theories employed to address behavioral aspects. We may use some sociology parts, right, some sociology theories, some other theories that perhaps cannot fit into a very specific context of operations and with very defined objective, which is trying to make them more efficient. And we saw, and that's why there is an interesting literature that OR modeling processes are really a sort of some social event somehow. So all the theories that describe the social aspects of OR modeling, right? Can be applied to study the behavioral aspects of OR. While right in behavioral operations management is really very specific in terms of normative theories and the field of economics. That makes one of the big differences. In terms of methodologies, clearly both, but I would say behavioral OR has a good practice in terms of experimental research methods, but is not as widespread as behavioral operations management. Behavioral operations management, most of the papers that you see about behavioral operations management are experiments, are lab experiments, compared to behavioral operational research, where you have as well a lot of practice and field research, action research. So clearly, I think behavioral OR is more contextual than behavioral operations management. It takes into consideration much more aspects. Clearly, that's why I say this aspect that the context involve activities, resources, actors, decision makers. So there's quite a lot of more variables that can affect the behavior of the participants in this type of models. And clearly, the stakeholders are completely different, right? If you are in behavioral operations management, you are dealing with the manager that is running a supply chain or some operations, a manager that is subject to a certain metrics, subject to economic decision making, right? Processes. So it's much narrow the sort of the variation that you can consider from the behavioral aspects in behavioral operations management and in behavioral OR. And I think that's make behavioral OR a much richer field than behavioral operations management. Somehow we may see that behavioral operations management may be a subset within behavioral operational research, rather than sort of having to separate. Potentially, we can also see that behavioral operational research can divide into a specific service area or a specific functions, organizational functions. One can be behavioral operational research applied to operations, and that will be behavioral operations management, but also behavioral operational research applied to, for example, in hospital, when you apply in hospital really to the scheduling of different patients, or just simply running a workshop. So clearly, there can be potentially a sort of separation or in terms of contribution, having this sort of a specialization in specific areas that behavioral operations management can help behavioral OR in that aspect. So to summarize these similarities and differences, so when in terms of the aims of the practice, behavioral operations management try to detect deviation from normative theories that are related to the field of operations management. So trying to see when maximization or minimization, right, is not working, with the objective functions are not being satisfied. On the other hand, behavioral operational research is trying to understand and embed in the behavioral aspects in the practice of soft and hard OR modeling related to problem solving, and that gives a huge scope and decision support. The scope, traditional activities in operations, we see papers related to inventory management, production management, service management, product development, quality management, supply chain. There is one core area, which is operation. On the other hand, in behavioral operational research, the practice of development OR models for different organizational contexts and type of problems. We have a strategic, tactical, and operational, with the focus on how we consider the behavioral models, how we use our models, and how the models impact beyond just simply using the models. So the core area is models. One is operations, the other is models. So clearly, at that point, we will say, okay, we may not have many overlaps, but there can be some opportunities there. Behavioral theory applies is economics, organizational behavior. On the other hand, in behavioral operational research, bounded rationality, group dynamics, organizational behavior as well. Methodologies, experiments, survey, modeling, data set, biometric and psychometric research. I would say that behavioral OR is more action research, experimental research. So in that case, we may learn something from behavioral operations management. And the stakeholders is very defined in behavioral operations management. Managers and workers. On behavioral operational research is consultant, analyst, decision makers. So clearly that gives a completely different set of stakeholders. So two different potentially examples of behavioral operations management and behavioral operational research that you can look at this in more detail is this paper in the Journal of Operations Management about individual difference in news vendor problem. So that's a very well-known problem in operations management, how to optimize, right, the delivery and the routine. And clearly what they did here is a set of experiments looking at different conditions that make that this model is not working from the and in the behavioral operation research in practice, there is this paper from a PhD where we we have five managers in five different small companies where we did the system dynamics model with them. We help them to make decisions, and we measure how they change their mental model, what sort of variables they include, sort of different aspects. And then we came 1 year later and see how they were doing and how much of those decisions were implemented and insights. So could be these two clearly potential examples that tell you a bit of each field. So to sort of finalize in terms of opportunities, so clearly what is missing in operations or in behavioral operations management is that they have very well defined models, but the question is what's happened with those models? Are they reflecting the reality? Are they reflecting the real setting? So in that case, perhaps a behavioral OR can help to look at the behavioral aspects of structuring the problems in operations. So thinking, are these models really satisfactory to manage your operations? And it's potentially an area of contribution from the behavioral OR. So definitely we can learn from each other how we do experiments, how we use psychology theories, how we use normative or quasi-normative models. So that's a source of help, right? Definitely we both are quite concerned on the behavioral in models, right? In the case of the behavioral operations management, they already have their models well defined. In the case of the behavioral operational research, most of our models are contextual to the problem that we are solving. So it's clearly that different. However, I think a potential way of that behavioral operational research can approach more the hard OR part, where they do pure optimization. It's perhaps learn what are the issues that behavioral operations management are addressing from these hard OR models that in behavioral operational research, perhaps we don't see that much. Definitely, we have that same concern about behavior beyond models. So how we try to improve the performance by influencing behavior of the actors and decision makers. So that is an important aspects that perhaps we can consider. With this, I'm finishing the presentation. It was a quick overview of this topic. Definitely, there's a lot more of things for research in that area.